Welcome to the next episode of the Brandland podcast. I am your host, Garrett Justice, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different for our episode this week. Instead of bringing on a guest, I wanted to just actually share some thoughts that I've been thinking about with regards to brand building. So today, part of the inspiration for this for me is this is something that's been top of mind for me the last few weeks and months even. On this podcast, we often talk about, how companies can build their brands. And I've noticed a change happening with regards to brand building in the world. And that's what I want to talk about today a little bit. And so that's specifically with regard to brand building on social media. In the last year or so, there have been a lot of marketers and people who are known for their expertise on brand building, who've come out and shared this idea that personal brand is the new company brand, or the secret to building a company brand, especially on social media. So I want to break that idea down and talk a little bit more about that today, and why I see that as a change that's going to continue to happen. It's happening today and going to continue to happen into the future. So again, that idea of personal brand, or building a brand for your company that's synonymous with your employees. And that's the way that companies can continue to build their brand and awareness going forward. So I guess to back up a little bit and give a little context and background on this, I think when people talk about brand building online, they naturally think about social media. Social media, the first social media platforms, started a while ago, years ago. The ones that are biggest today, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, they all started in the early 2000s. I think Facebook was launched in about 2004. I think Twitter was about 2 years later, around 2006. So these platforms are now, 15, 20 years old, and there's been a lot of evolution. What's interesting about these social media platforms is, when they first launch it, what's so unique about them is it gave people and also brands a platform or a voice, a way for others to get to know who they are and a little bit more about them, especially when it comes to like short form content. It removed the barriers of, blogs existed at the time, but that's more long form content. It removed the barriers so anyone could have a voice online without having to go write long form content on a blog. Over time, marketers we're notorious for, ruining everything. Isn't that how the classic saying goes? So over time, marketers began to turn social media accounts, especially company branded social media accounts, as a way to just promote content online and drive more traffic to their website and their blogs. And so as a result, I think we've seen this aversion. People have this aversion to wanting to follow company social media accounts online. And as a result, your employees' social media accounts and the personal brands that they're building are becoming increasingly important, right? Of course, there's some caveats to this. I think that there are some brands who on their company branded social media accounts do a great job today. Some examples that come to mind are especially on Twitter. I think Wendy's has a really funny, catchy branded account. Lots of other consumer brands like that, especially on a platform like Twitter, can kind of build a personality and a following there. But I think overall, we're seeing a trend move away from that, where people, again, have less trust in company brands. And so going forward, I think it's going to be increasingly important for companies to build a brand that's synonymous with their employees and help encourage their employees to build their own personal brands. And that's what's going to help build their company brand, especially across social media. So why is this? I've talked about some of these changes and some of the evolution of this, but, a couple of other thoughts that come to mind for me is that, buying, whether you're buying a consumer product, or whether it's Wendy's or a Moon Pie, or you're buying software, buying is really about trust. And with the increased noise online, it's getting harder and harder, I think, for people to trust companies, which again, that's one of the main reasons why building a strong brand overall is important. The second reason, though, is that people buy from people. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're buying enterprise software or a Happy Meal. You're buying from a person, and when you can build connections and get to know and get to and start to trust people, it helps you trust the brand that's behind those people. So again, this idea that going forward, increasingly, especially when it comes to social media, companies that really want to build their brands online are going to have to leverage and support individual employees building their personal brands. So I have a couple of just tips and some ideas for how to do that I just want to share. And again, I want to preface this by saying I am by no means a personal branding expert. There's plenty of people out there who have way more expertise in this than me, but this is stuff that I've noticed and I've experimented with, on trying to build my own personal brand over the last year and beyond, and how that ties into company brand. So some ideas for building a personal brand, and I'll focus this especially on the platforms that I'm most familiar with, which are probably LinkedIn and Twitter. I think that there's applications for this, though, especially for for many consumer brands. Facebook is the big platform, or Instagram, or whatever it is. So I think a lot of these tips are applicable regardless of whether you are managing a personal brand, a company brand, or a consumer brand, or a B2B brand. So anyways, here's some of my tips for building especially that personal brand across LinkedIn and Twitter. So tip number one is to post valuable content on topics that you really care about. I would say 80% or more of the content that you post on social media should be your own thoughts or ideas. It's so much easier to just post a link to a blog post or some other piece of content. And that's what most people end up doing. They just post a link to a blog post out there instead of write content or create content specifically for the platform like LinkedIn or Twitter and their own thoughts or ideas. It takes more time and effort to do that, but that's how you actually start to build that personal brand across social media. And again, I think the other context that you need to have is, as marketing leaders and as brand builders at our companies, we need to be teaching these tips and ideas to all employees across our companies so that they can start building their personal brands, and we'll see that compounding effect for our company brands. So again, post valuable content on topics that you really care about, 80% or more, your own thoughts or ideas. And I think it's also just important to be real, to be yourself. And define your niche. And it really doesn't have to do with anything about your company. I think some good examples. I have a friend on LinkedIn who's built a good following and a good niche. He's worked. His background is as a lawyer, and he has worked for a lot of software companies, but he has this interesting niche on LinkedIn, especially where his hobbies are around travel. And as part of his job, he travels before COVID, would travel a lot. And so he has this travel blog on the side. And so he posts a lot of tips about traveling and things he's learned along the way. He's also a big basketball fan, and so he'll post things about basketball. So really, at the end of the day, that has nothing to do with his company brand, but it doesn't matter because he's building trust. He's building a following on his social media accounts in his own niche, and behind him, people are seeing that company brand that he works for. So as they begin to trust him, they're beginning to see and understand more about the company that he works for, and sharing some of that, their trust that they have for him with the company brand that stands behind him. So another example that comes to mind of just being real and authentic and finding your niche is I know another designer who has recently started posting productivity tips because he just loves finding cool new tools and productivity tips. I think that's awesome. I mean, it might not have anything to do specifically with the brand that he supports, the company's brand behind him, but it's building his own personal brand, and it's building a following and building trust. So the next tip of, building personal brand across social media accounts um, is trying to just to tell stories. And again, that ties into valuable content on topics that you care about. It's stories from your experience. That's what always seems to get the most engagement and interest. And of course, sharing opinions. Um, so again, those tie into that first point of posting valuable content. The next tip, though, is just to be consistent. I think one of the hardest things when it comes to social media is many of us who've tried to post regularly and build a personal brand on social media, it kind of ebbs and flows, where we say, okay, I'm going to do this, and we post something, and then it kind of falls off and other things pop up. So it's important to make sure you set aside time. This is a long-term play. It's not a short-term thing. And so consistency is key, important. So for me, I've set some goals around how many times I want to post per week. I have a running doc of ideas that, as inspiration strikes, I go and write it down, and then I can kind of go to that, and I have some ideas that I can flesh out for, those times where I've committed to myself that I'm going to be posting. The other key piece of this is, as you continue to post online, some posts will get a few comments, some will get none. And it doesn't matter. I think you just got to keep doing it anyways, because it's going to take some time to build an audience and hone in on the content that people really find most valuable. So the key is that you're doing it consistently and you're learning. The last tip for building that personal brand is commenting on others' posts. I think this is something that most people just kind of forget about. You should be spending as much time engaging in other people's posts and commenting there as much time doing that as you do creating content. The reason why is obviously it helps bring more visibility to your own posts. It can help you build relationships with other people who are posting on similar topics. It can help you gain your own followers and get ideas of it can also help you get ideas of topics that you want to post about. So again, just to wrap up this idea, I think, and to summarize that we're seeing a trend that's happening. I've noticed this trend, consistently, that personal brand is the key to building your company brand, especially across social media. So find ways to empower your employees to build their own personal brands. And what that comes down to is them posting valuable content. So some of their own original content, not just sharing your blog post, trying to tell stories, being real, being their self, even if it has nothing to do with what your company sells. Encouraging them to be consistent, and also to spend time commenting and engaging on other people's posts. And I think that as you do that, and as you can do that really well, that there are compounding effects that will help you build your company brand online as well. And I think there's plenty of good examples of companies who've done this well out there. One that comes to mind in more the B2B software space, many of you might be familiar with Dave Gerhardt. So especially if you're on LinkedIn and in marketing in that B2B space, Dave Gerhardt has a pretty big following and posts a lot. He was previously at Drift, a software company, and has since moved over to be the CMO of another company. But I think Drift is a company that has done that really well, where they've encouraged and empowered their employees to build their personal brands online. And their company brand is really synonymous with that, the personal brands of their employees. And they've seen a lot of benefits from doing that. So again, just to kind of wrap it up, that's something that's been top of mind for me. And hopefully that's something that you can take away and think about how you can apply, whether it's personally building your own personal brand, or whether it's empowering employees and training employees on how to build their personal brands, because I think that's going to be the differentiating factor going forward as social media continues to evolve. For companies that really can stand out on social media and build a good following there, it's going to be those that empower those employees to build their personal brands, not those who try and focus on building their company profile and brand and followers there. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and look forward to, hope you can tune in next week to our next episode on the Brandland podcast. Thanks.